Hey everyone, we'll get started in just a minute. Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon or late morning to all of our attendees. Hope everyone has been staying safe and healthy over these past several months. Today, we're super excited to share how restaurant brands are leveraging Foursquare and Apptopia's data from AWS Data Exchange to adapt to changing consumer behavior. I'll be your moderator today. Let me advance the slide. Cool. I'll be your monitor today. I'm Mohsen from the AWS Data Exchange team. I'm excited to be joined by Ariel Siegel, Director of Data Insights at Foursquare, and Adam Blacker, VP of Insights at Apptopia. We're super thrilled to discuss a trend that we've observed over the past several months since the rise of the pandemic and how restaurant brands have been surviving. So just as quick background, we talked to Ariel, we talked to Adam, and we were thinking about the ways in which we can better support restaurant brands to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. Obviously, the pandemic has significantly changed consumer dining behavior and habits, requiring restaurant brands to shift their business models and accelerate their adoption of things like online ordering, curbside pickup, contactless delivery. But in order to create a more clear picture of the shifting landscape of the dining industry, we've actually combined Apptopia's mobile app usage data with Foursquare's location data to try to paint this picture of how consumer behavior has been changing. Our hypothesis, an obvious one in the beginning, that while foot traffic has slowed down, we would expect to see mobile app usage increase significantly. And while that has been true, it certainly hasn't been enough to make up for the lost sales that restaurant brands are seeing across the dine-in and brick and mortar space. So today we'll dig into a little bit more about these findings. Adam and Ariel will go into more detail around specific subcategories of restaurant and dining and how they've been responding to the pandemic and shifting trends. And just as by way of background, both Foursquare and Apptopia are data providers on AWS Data Exchange. AWS Data Exchange is a relatively new service within AWS that makes it easier for enterprises to procure third-party data. We know our customers are investing more heavily in data science, analytics, AI, and ML capabilities to power things like customer acquisition, retention, new market expansion, improve their forecasting models. But there hasn't always been an easy way for them to quickly access, ingest, and drive value out of new data sources. What AWS Data Exchange does is it gives them a catalog of over 2,600 data products, over 150 plus data providers, including Apptopia and Foursquare. And whether you're subscribing to a single product or hundreds of products, all of that data is now delivered to you with a single API. So you no longer have to code up to the different data delivery methods of each provider. We also integrate the delivery with into other AWS services that your data science and analytics teams are likely using. We give enterprises a single view of all subscriptions as they enter and are federated out to different teams. And then we simplify billing, which is usually a big relief for anyone in a procurement role. Digging into today's agenda. So Ariel and Adam will walk us through how to combine both Apptopia and Foursquare's data sets. They'll walk us through some of their findings and then highlight key trends, and then point you to two data sources that you can actually access on AWS Data Exchange to hopefully be able to derive your own insights as they relate to your own restaurant brands. And with that, I'll pass it off to Adam and Ariel.
Cool. Just give you a brief overview of what Apptopia actually is. We are a business intelligence provider for the mobile app world. So publishers, marketing partners, VCs, public equity investors, they all use our data to make strategic decisions on a daily basis. For publishers like the ones that we're going to be talking about today, it's understanding their market share, the market share of their competitors, as well as understanding what competitors' strategies are working, which aren't working. And for investors, it's as simple as looking into a company on our platform and determining via their performance, whether that be new user growth, in-app purchase revenue, user retention, et cetera, if they're worth betting on or worth betting against.
And Foursquare, for those of you who aren't familiar, is the leading independent location technology platform. And so location is at the center of everything that we do. We understand how people are moving about the world and how those patterns are changing over time. We then use that knowledge and our proprietary technology to help brands, developers, agencies, marketers, and analysts understand consumers and better engage with them. So two very powerful data sets, and now we'll talk about how to combine them and the methodology for this research. So, we analyze consumers' dining behavior based on both the foot traffic from the millions of Americans in Foursquare's Always On panel, combined with Apptopia's data on the usage of these restaurant brands' mobile apps. We use data from 2019 and 2020 because this enables you to look at year-over-year changes, allowing you to isolate the impact of COVID and then also account for seasonality. So we looked at visitation as well as the daily active users of those mobile apps. We then looked at smoothing the curve. So there's obviously going to be fluctuations in terms of the day of the week. So we use 7-day rolling averages for the foot traffic and weekly sums for the mobile app usage data to sort of smooth the curves and identify more macro trends. Next, we are indexing the data. So indexing is a really great strategy because it enables you to look at the relative upticks and declines, adjusting for any changes in the sample size within these data sets. So in order to index, what we do is we use the first week of each year, and we take the total volume, and then we take each week and compare it to that first week to allow you to say, hey, foot traffic went up by 20%, while mobile app usage went up by 50%, and things like that. We then also decided to group chains. So all of the data that we looked at in this study was based on a subset of chains within the overall category. So we took a list of restaurants across QSR as well as casual dining, and then we broke it down into meaningful categories such as coffee shops versus sandwich shops. And that allows you to identify different trends and how an individual chain is comparing versus their category. So for this, we looked at aggregated visits and aggregated app usage, and that creates a sort of benchmark that you can compare to. One thing that's also important to note in terms of methodology with these two data sets is that they're not always going to go hand in hand. And so a chain could perform well in terms of foot traffic and not in terms of mobile app usage or vice versa. So you can think about a correlation analysis, which allows you to understand even more rich insights based on which sort of quadrant a chain falls into. And so if there's high app usage and high foot traffic, that means, for example, that there's a strong mobile app that's often being used for takeout or browsing before dining in. And so the chain is performing well on both of those counts, but there's other implications for those other 4 quadrants as well. So with that, that's sort of an overview of the methodology, and I'll pass it back to Adam to dive into some of the key trends.
Yeah, so we're gonna get into sandwiches, but like Ariel and Mohsen said, I think these two data sets working together, they work really well, right? Especially for dining, like brands that we're looking at today. Foursquare represents the physical, Apptopia represents the digital, and so applying these multiple perspectives to the same problem gives us a much fuller picture into the market that, or a company that you want to look into. And I think, like Mohsen said, the hypothesis was simple. Overall, we expected foot traffic to go down, digital mobile to go up. And in some cases that rang true, and in others we didn't, so we'll get into it. But I can say, mobile is up. 21 of the 37 mobile apps we reviewed for this actually did hit their highest number of daily active users in their lifetimes between the months of April and July of this year. But like we said, we don't think mobile fully offset the impact of the pandemic, right? So dining brands did invest in mobile experiences. It wasn't enough to make up for the loss of business from the foot traffic. People are still not going to those physical locations. So they're surviving, not thriving, and I think mobile ordering has enabled them to survive to some extent. So let's get into sandwiches. All right. So as you can see from the data on this slide, right, foot traffic for sandwich shops was down, but it was down, significantly less than the other dining categories that we looked at. And at the same time, the growth was pretty strong. It was the strongest that we looked at in terms of daily active users. And the chains that we are talking about when we're saying sandwich shops, we're talking about things like, Subways, your Firehouse Subs, Jimmy John's, Jersey Mike's, things like that. And all these places, they have order ahead through the mobile app, which lends itself to keeping a bit of the foot traffic going right. Jimmy John's specifically actually does delivery through its app. So that could be a reason why it was actually the second largest app that we looked at. But the others, they use platforms like Grubhub. And as we can see in the next slide, we're going to call out a company with each slide when we're looking at the market. And so for here, we're calling out Subway, right? They are the biggest, and they're also the biggest in terms of locations. They're also the biggest in terms of foot traffic and the biggest in terms of daily active users for the mobile app. So they've done very well for themselves. That's all I have for sandwiches.
So the next trend is around coffee, and coffee is interesting because it certainly relies most on that morning day part, and people's routines have really been disrupted since COVID happened, where people are no longer commuting and going into the office or to their place of work. And so whereas before the pandemic, breakfast and coffee was one of the places where we saw the strongest customer loyalty, we've really seen that upended this year, and coffee has been hit particularly hard by the pandemic. So, as people are staying at home, we suspect that they're likely, making their coffee, getting their caffeine fix at home instead of going out for that. So this refers to chains like Starbucks, Peet's Coffee. And so you'll see here that coffee shop app usage was only up, went up a little bit this year, but overall was down from Q2 of this year to Q2 of last year. And foot traffic went down really significantly, 29 to 33% at the end of July, whereas fast food overall was down a little bit less, only about 20 to 25%. So really saw a big dip here. And in particular, we decided to take a spotlight on Peet's Coffee, and they're underperforming even relative to the coffee category. So you'll see here that app usage was down at the end of July, and overall year over year, and then visits were also down quite significantly. Peet's Coffee actually went public this year, which is interesting, but they have other areas of their business, such as subscription coffee and coffee in grocery stores they're selling, so they're not necessarily relying only on that foot traffic and app usage for their revenue, but thought this one was certainly worth calling out as an outlier.
And I can attest to that. I've definitely been making coffee at home every day, so it's much more of a treat now when I do get around to. I actually order pizza in, so they're probably making money from there. All right, let's talk about drive-through QSR. So this is the biggest grouping we have. 16 businesses in this grouping, so we're looking at heavy hitters: McDonald's, Taco Bell, Chipotle, Panera Bread, etc. Those kind of people. And we see our hypothesis playing out here. The foot traffic is down, mobile app usage is up. But the foot traffic is actually down less than that of casual dining. Ariel will touch on that next, because most of these companies have drive-throughs. And so none of these players have their own delivery. Many partner with platforms, again, like Grubhub. Most of them do have mobile order ahead, which has had an impact. And you'll see that impact when you look at Foursquare's data, Apptopia's data. because foot traffic has still declined in spite of the mobile order ahead being on the rise, to me it says mobile actually has a ton of room to run, right? So for this segment and in general, after looking through both data sets, it's clear that today the majority of businesses, the majority of these types of businesses still make most of their money through foot traffic and without mobile ordering. But the pandemic has obviously started to shift this. Let's look at Sonic specifically. They're a bit of an outlier here. It's a really interesting example where, yes, it did well with mobile, saw an increase in foot traffic as well, though, during the pandemic. So the app's official name is Sonic Drive-In, and it specifically pushes users to order ahead, use the drive-through, and it's a really smart move because even though, yes, they're on platforms like Postmates, Sonic knows it does not want to pay those platform fees. They can be expensive. And so you can see in the visual here that there's a really high correlation between our data sets.
So thinking about casual dining, there's certainly a very different picture here. And so casual dining is referring to a specific set of chains where there's sit-down service. So think Olive Garden, Outback Steakhouse, restaurants like that, where there's a waiter coming. And they used to rely heavily on dine-in rather than takeout, drive-through, things like that. And so they were hit really hard by the pandemic. They suffered most of any dining category that we've seen in terms of traffic, with visits down, about 40% at the end of July. And this is unsurprising given that there were tremendous restrictions on dine-in in many states this summer. Mobile app usage, meanwhile, was up, similar to other dining categories that we saw and consistent with our hypothesis. But it was only up, it was up about 65% from one quarter, the quarter last year, to Q2 of this year. And so the divergence really indicates to us that casual dining brands may be having conversion issues on their apps. So they're gaining new app users, but maybe those app users are just browsing the menu and not necessarily ordering. They are also often available via third-party food delivery apps like Grubhub and DoorDash, where maybe there are people who are browsing the menu within the brand's apps, but then they're ultimately converting somewhere else. So it's not necessarily making up for it in terms of foot traffic. They're surviving, but they're not really thriving. And so this is certainly an area where there's room for improvement. And in particular, we decided to take a look at Buffalo Wild Wings as one example. They have outperformed the casual dining category overall in both metrics. So while casual dining overall was down 30 to 40% in terms of foot traffic, they were only down 10 to 20% in July. And app usage was up even more than the category overall. So Buffalo Wild Wings has a couple things going for it that might explain this trend. First, they were highlighting free delivery. And so while before perhaps they were relying more on dine-in, highlighting the option for delivery might be helping them with their app usage, as well as explaining why foot traffic would be down because they wouldn't be necessarily using the app for takeout. We confirmed this by seeing that there is a strong negative correlation. So when we refer back to those 4 quadrants that we talked about before, this chain has a negative correlation between foot traffic and mobile app usage. So that is another indicator that it's likely being used for delivery.
Yep. Pizza. Pizza is like the original delivery king here. So all of the pizza providers that we looked at, they offer pickup in the app, but they offer delivery as well, unlike a lot of the other providers that we're talking about. Some of them even do partner with platforms, but a lot of them don't. Domino's famously refuses to partner with those platforms. And even before the pandemic, these companies did not encourage dining in. So it's a really good example to look at. So, and here it is. So for a long time, pizza's been like the immediate thought. You can't cook, you don't want to cook. You need something quick, easy, that most everyone likes. And so when the pandemic kicked in, either you were scarce on food or you didn't want to go to the grocery store. And so delivery got a massive uptick here from pizza. And so, the changing trend line in both foot traffic and mobile app usage happened at the exact same time, pretty sharp. You can see it in that image. They both just kind of, or that's how you do it. They just kind of diverge from each other there. So that tells us that there's a much higher rate of deliveries going on, especially through mobile. And we're going to look at Papa John's specifically, which is coming up. And we noticed the foot traffic and the mobile app usage correlated much more closely for Papa John's than it did for the other pizza businesses that we were looking at. And so that means that we just said that there was a lot of mobile order ahead and a high delivery rate. But for Papa John's specifically, it actually looks like, there's a lot more takeout happening when compared to the other pizza chains. So I was like wondering why is this? And then I thought to look into the locations for Papa John's. And I realized that after reviewing that information, they have many more locations in states and areas where COVID guidelines were a little more relaxed. So I think that probably accounted for people going in there, which then makes the mobile and the foot traffic much more correlated. And that's all we got for pizza.
So those 5 trends really highlight these 5 categories that we mentioned, and then we looked at specific chains within that were over or underperforming relative to their category. So we saw sandwich chains doing well, we saw coffee chains doing not so well. We saw how QSRs are likely doing better than other dining categories because they're relying on drive-through and takeout. We saw casual dining chains really suffering more than others because they're known for dine-in. And then pizza as an interesting anomaly, typically doing a lot of delivery. And so, you can see throughout these analysis that combining the location data with the Apptopia mobile app data allows you to derive even richer insights than you would get with either data set alone. And that's really one of the wonderful things about Amazon Data Exchange, is that it brings these unique data sets together in a way that becomes even more powerful. And so this lets you gain a comprehensive view of the dining landscape in a way that either data set alone might not. They're both strong indicators of brand health. Foot traffic can be a great indicator of that takeout and dine-in traffic, and to what extent brick and mortar is recovering, informing things like whether or not restaurants should open back up again for dine-in and when, or whether they should be continuing to promote their delivery. And so keeping a finger on the pulse of foot traffic can be really powerful there. And then conversely, the mobile app data can be really helpful as an indicator of success in that investment in the mobile experience. And whether consumers are really engaging there, both in terms of downloads, but in terms of daily usage in particular. So both strong indicators of brand health, even more powerful together. So we're excited to be partnering with Amazon Data Exchange to combine these data sets and encourage you guys to unlock all of these rich insights and even more that you can do yourselves today. So you'll find links right here to both of these data sets to unlock. We'll also be publishing a robust white paper with even more of the findings that we didn't have time to get to today, that we encourage you to download and check out and share with your teams.
Yeah, we cut it for time, but we flew through this.
You did, yeah. Thank you. This was super interesting. We have a bunch of questions coming in as well. But just to reiterate Ariel's point, if you log into Data Exchange today, you'll see listings from both Foursquare and Apptopia that are free and available for you to download today. If you need more custom data slices, you can of course reach out to Foursquare and Apptopia, and they'd be happy to publish that on Data Exchange for you to access. But awesome webinar. We'll jump into a Q&A now. First question for both of you is, maybe you could chat a little bit more about how Apptopia and Foursquare's data is sourced.
Sourced, yeah. So we estimate mobile app data for over 7 million apps. We are connected to more than 125,000 mobile apps, and we use that as a learning set, and we combine it with publicly available signals, things like the App Store ranks, and our data science team basically combines all that and creates models to estimate every app. If you go to apptopia.com/our-data, you can read a lot more, because we're very transparent. I gave you a very high level overview of what we're doing there, but we will get down into the very nitty gritty with you if you would like.
On the Foursquare side, you probably know Foursquare as the check-in app invented 11 years ago for people to raise their hand and say, I am here, and become the mayor of their local coffee shop. We've evolved over the past 11 years to become this leading location technology platform, because we developed this proprietary technology called Pilgrim, which detects signals from devices, from multiple sensors within your phone, so GPS, lat long, accelerometer, Wi-Fi, and identifies whether a person is in a place based on the unique thumbprint of a place, the way your phone sees it. And so we've built up this first-party map of the world to understand the way your phone sees the world, and then we used true stop detection to understand when a person is truly stopped in a place and making a visit versus just passing by. So we are collecting that data not only from our owned and operated apps today, but then we also license that data to partners who pass back data to become a part of our panel. So this research is all based on our first-party panel, CityGuide Swarm, as well as other SDK partners. So we have about 13 million consumers with that always-on location data. And the key thing to note there is that there's a true utility for consumers to share their location. And so we're very privacy focused. We are encouraging more regulation because we believe in that value exchange. And so consumers want to share their location with our app and our partner apps because they get value out of it with a better, contextual experience. So we then are normalizing that first-party data using US Census data to be reflective of overall population trends. Our visit feeds within Amazon Data Exchange include a normalization weighting that enables analysts to do that weighting themselves as well.
Great. Another question that came in was, what geographic considerations were taken into account in the analysis? So the example with Pete's being primarily a West Coast coffee house, stricter shelter-in-place orders, does that kind of explain for why their performance was as you guys indicated?
Yeah, so this analysis was all done on a national level, but the data sets themselves are available down into different geographies. And so we at Foursquare have been looking at it in terms of, west versus east, urban versus suburban versus rural, even down to specific cities and counties. So we really enable that type of geographic analysis for you to dive deeper yourselves. But for this study, we focused on the national, and then we would hypothesize that there's certainly geographic skews that might explain some of the trends.
Awesome. And then Adam, in the Pete's example, how does Apptopia's data become actionable for a Pete's so that their coffee app performance is more up to par with the industry? Or if you're in casual dining, how do you be more like Buffalo Wild Wings in terms of app performance? How does your data kind of what would you do for your restaurant brand?
Well, I think one of the strongest use cases for our data in the restaurant industry is it can kind of, if you use it right, and I'll explain how to do that. If you use it right, you can kind of have your promotions designed via data. And what I mean by that is, all of your competitors have done promotions. Some of them maybe are driving people to the mobile app, some of them aren't. But what you can do is you can go and find out when those promotions were and for how long they ran. And you can go and look and see what was the uptick or not in their data. So, okay, Burger King or Starbucks, whoever it is, whoever your competitor is, they ran some promotion. Okay, did it increase downloads? If so, by how much? Did they do another promotion? Did that increase downloads more or less? In what countries did that work? Was it global? Was it the United States? Was it another country? And then we also estimate user retention. So like, okay, great, they got all these new users. Did they stay, or did they just want to get that burger for 99 cents and now they don't care about Burger King anymore? And so you can kind of see which promotions are working better, which promotions work better for downloads versus long-term user retention. And then based on that information, kind of design your own promotion for your goals.
Really helpful. Ariel, question for you. How representative is the Foursquare panel to over US population?
Yeah, so we have about 13 million users in the panel, as I mentioned. And while there are certainly certain skews in terms of age, gender, and geography, what we do is we've developed this normalization weight, as I mentioned, based on the demographics and geographics that enable our insights to become representative of the overall population and remove any of those skews. So happy to share any more details about that normalization in follow-ups, but we're continually investing in that normalization methodology to ensure that the panel-based approach is as accurate as possible.
Great. Another question that came in was, were there any really unexpected findings during your research that you came across?
I would say which is the one with Sonic. Yes, that Sonic's foot traffic actually rose. Yeah, that was surprising to me. But then we looked into it. We saw, the app it specifically was driving people, and so I think that's a takeaway, right? It was specifically driving people to, even when they were looking at the mobile app instead of getting delivery, like come drive through. That's what this is for. So some people who are downloading it may think that this is an app specific for drive-through. I don't know. Either way, it seems to have worked, and they got a lot of foot traffic in the door. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Awesome. And then a question for the both of you that came in was, is your data available in other geos or countries, specifically for this question, Spain?
So yes, Apptopia is available in, I want to say 65 plus countries, and I believe we're working to expand that. Spain is one of them.
And Foursquare does have international data sets as well.
Awesome. And you both alluded to this several times, but can you share any specific examples of brands today that are using your data to drive decision making?
I don't want to get in trouble. I don't know what brands I'm allowed to name or not. I will say that yes. So for example, I know a top retail app uses Apptopia, a top QSR app uses Apptopia. So yes, there are plenty of big brands using us. I just don't want to get in trouble, and I can't really name drop them.
No worries, Adam. Question on that: Are they typically using it for what teams that are using those your data at these companies typically?
That's a great question. I wish my customer success team was here because they could tell me like the titles and everything. So I don't know the team names. I know what they're using them for. They are using them for things like we talked about before, understanding their competitors' promotions. Is it working for them? Is it not working for them? And even things like they're tracking UI and UX changes. So when a competitor changes even like a checkout flow, or they're trying different push notifications, they want to see or an advertising campaign, they want to see what is the impact of that. Should we do something similar? Should we stay away from that? And so we like to think Apptopia is helping them save money by learning from their competitors' mistakes.
On the Foursquare side, historically, location technology was first adopted in the advertising and marketing landscape. And so we at Foursquare merged with a company called Plaze 2 years back, which is the leader in online to store attribution. And so I think similar to what Adam was talking about, we do a lot of work where we're measuring whether a given campaign is driving incremental foot traffic to locations to help marketers quantify the ROI of their investment. And then, we actually merged with a company called Factual this year, which is the leader in location-based targeting. And so we do a lot of work with brands to leverage this data to help tailor messaging to specific location-based audiences. And so you can identify who is the person who is getting takeout from a restaurant right now versus who is the person who hasn't been to a restaurant since the pandemic hit and is going to be better suited to messaging about delivery. And so we're working with a lot of leading QSRs and casual dining restaurants to activate those types of strategies. Since the pandemic, though, there's been a lot more interest in location for more purely analytics use cases. And so we worked with some leading brands to help inform their franchisees to figure out, whether or not they should open in specific counties based on foot traffic to their category in that county, with a dynamic tool that we launched called the Recovery Index, which shows foot traffic upticks and declines down to a county level. We're seeing increased interest in using location data for real estate planning, for site selection, demand planning, and quantitative investing as well. So lots of different use cases for this data set, both at brands and then at lots of other different types of partners.
And then a question for both of you would be, so Adam, is Apptopia's data typically on a 1-day lag, is that right?
Yeah, so our data updates every 24 hours. Its granularity is just that, 1 day.
Got it. And Ariel, for the analytics use case, like what's the most common update frequency you see from customers?
It's also a 24-hour lag typically.
Got it. Great. Another question that came in was, if you could overlay a third data source on top of the mobile app usage data and foot traffic data for this analysis, what would that be?
I have an answer. I'm curious to hear Ariel's answer. I think I would do either web or mobile web, right? And to capture, I guess, 100% of the digital picture, right? Yeah, what do you think?
I think it's sales data, right? I think that each brand can take this data themselves and compare it to their transaction data to understand how those transactions are taking place. We also experimented with combining this with stock data and earning stock prices, things like that. So I think, comparing these indicators with financial performance could give you an even fuller picture.
That's a great point. I missed that. Yes, like key indicators that are reported from public companies. Foursquare and Apptopia both had success lining those up and seeing those correlations and making some money for yourself.
Another question came in. So Apptopia and Foursquare also partnered on a report for the automotive industry. I'm not sure if both of you worked on that one as well, but in the event that you did, what were some insights you uncovered, and how do they kind of relate to how the restaurant industry has bounced back or attempting to?
That's a great question. Yes, we have worked together before on that report. And what we did there is we looked at foot traffic to places like train stations, metro stations, bus stations, gas stations, and transportation. And then Adam looked at mobile app usage of, MTA schedule and different apps like that. Uber, Lyft, to understand how mobility is being reimagined since the pandemic. So I think that was similarly interesting in that it showed just how much everything has changed this year. We saw that consumers are really avoiding public transit, looking to social distance. I thought it was surprising in that report that we were able to see that people are going back to rideshare faster than things like train and metro. We also saw people using a lot of bike shares and bike shops, interest in fixing up their cars and auto repairs because people are on the road more. So definitely recommend checking out that report. And I think it's another great example of how our two data sets are quite complementary.
Awesome. Then Adam, another question came in for you. Does Apptopia have data on delivery apps?
Yeah, absolutely. If you've heard of the app, there's a 99.99% chance that we do estimate it and have performance data on it. Great.
If anyone else in the audience has questions, you can chat them into the chat on the webinar. And I'll give everyone a couple seconds to see if we get anything else.
With regard to the mobility report, yeah, things like your Carvanas were doing really well as people not only wanted to, yes, get away from public transit and have your own, mode of transportation, but you're also getting it from somewhere like Carvana. You're not going to a physical location like a car dealership. because of the pandemic. And so you're kind of having the car delivered right to you. So we saw things like that doing very well. And I know, Ariel, your data picked up on people's basically daily commute patterns changing. And so therefore, marketers who might have been reaching people, on their morning drive, that's been switched. And so they might need to, switch up their strategy.
Yeah, people moving around in the middle of the day a lot more since the pandemic with their routines upended. So I think that, yeah, intersects with what we're seeing with coffee here in this report.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's all the questions that we have from the audience as well. Adam and Ariel, thank you so much for your time today. That was super insightful. Hopefully our attendees also found it insightful. They can find your data available on Data Exchange and reach out to these email aliases directly for any bespoke requests. But again, thank you so much for your time. And we will follow up with an email at the end of this webinar with some of the links that and content that we shared today.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye.